I'm sorry. He's over there waving at me, and I'm not paying any attention. Aaron was not able to be here this afternoon, so Jeff has offered to pinch hit for us here this afternoon. So we appreciate him stepping in. He's going to present his tips and thoughts from 3 decades of customer visits, sharing some general tricks to make our lives in engineering more efficient. Jeff is the sales manager for the U.S. Central Region for Nautel. He has been 16 years as a customer service technician, performing hundreds of transmitter site visits and field calls. He regularly presents sessions on engineering-related topics and authored the chapter on facility grounding in the most recent NAB Engineering Handbook. He has received the 2020 NAB Radio Engineering Achievement Award, the 2019 APRE Engineering Achievement Award, and the 2018 SBE Educator of the Year Award. And he has forgotten more than I ever knew. With that, I will turn it over to Jeff Welton.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Wait till we get to the end and then see if you still feel the same way. Every time I hear somebody read one of those, it just feels like I'm blowing smoke up my own tailpipe because, well, I wrote it. But so the topic is just tips and tricks, and it's a pretty simple agenda. I call this the presentation that never ends. There are 30 tips in this. It is taken from one I did for the Michigan broadcasters in a webinar right before COVID or after COVID, Dan?
You know, it's all a blur to me.
I know. Yeah, the past 4 years have all kind of run together. I don't know when I was, where I was, or who I was. But anyway, so we did that webinar. That was an hour-long webinar, and I was running at high speed by the time we got to the end. So we'll go till we run out of time or till y'all run out of questions or patience, and we'll call it a day. But we'll have some fun. There are 3 rules to a transmitter. And by the way, this is mostly tips and tricks for the transmitter site, and I don't care whether it's AM, FM, TV, cellular, ham set. The basic rules are going to be the same. Number 1, keep it cool. Now, you can't keep it cool if you don't know how much heat you're producing. So it's a good idea to have the math to calculate that. And I'm not going to regurgitate it because y'all can read, I think. And you mostly all know it. But you figure out how much power you're consuming, and then you figure out how much of that's going up the antenna. Well, that's your TPO for an FM or your output power for an AM plus modulation. What's left is heat, okay? Because what you're consuming less what's going up the antenna, what's left is always going to be heat. And to take watts to BTU per hour, multiply by 3.413, divide by 12,000 to get tons of air conditioning if you're air conditioning. So it's all math. How hard can it be? It's just math, right?
Arithmetic.
Arithmetic. Better, yes. Let's see, that's my Canadian coming out. I'm sorry. You what, where?
Don't even need the algebra.
Oh, that comes later.
No?
Actually, I don't know if I did any algebra in this one.
Once you don't have any calculus, we're good.
Not in this one, no. I do have some calculus. So the funny thing was they always told me, they go, you know, we were in school and they were like, you'll never use that stuff. I use that stuff every day. I mean, we're doing quadratic equations just to figure out SWR. You know, if you got forward power and reflected power, you can calculate your VSWR ratio, just or VSW ratio, voltage, yeah. Anyway, you can calculate it just with a little bit of algebra. Not that bad. Other thing about keeping it cool, if you're not air conditioning, positive pressure is your friend. I guarantee you 99% of transmitter sites do this wrong. Okay, when you've got air flowing through a transmitter, and every manufacturer out there, whether it's us, Gates Air, BE, doesn't matter, we'll all spec the airflow through the transmitter. We'll tell you how much air's got to move through it. So when you know how much air's got to move through it, you bring a little more than that into the building. You exhaust a little less than you bring in, and you'll be golden. So let's take an example. If you take one of our 30 kilowatts, got 1,900 cubic feet per minute airflow. If I bring 2,500 cubic feet into the building, and exhaust 2000, I've got positive pressure. That means that there's going to be air, filtered air coming into the building and leaking out through every crack and crevice, nook and cranny. If I do like almost every other site and just put an exhaust fan on the wall with no intake fan whatsoever, then that exhaust fan is going to be sucking air and dirt and dust in through every crack and crevice and nook and cranny. Okay, so the positive pressure will save you a pile. And it doesn't matter, tube, solid state. Solid state transmitters don't like to run hot. Transistors don't like to be warm. Tubes, the funny thing about tubes is they run on big volts. The funny thing about big volts is if you throw a little dust at them, boom. See, I knew I was going to get boom in here at least once. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing, in this part of the world, you can use louvers on your exhaust duct and recirculate the warm air into the building and warm the air, warm the room in the winter. You can use mechanical thermostatically controlled louvers and automate the whole system. And it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg. You know, a couple $1,000 worth of sheet metal work, intake fan, exhaust fan, bang, you're done. Especially down in this neck of the woods, I mean, y'all see 100-degree days. The problem with forced air is you can't cool things below the ambient temperature. So, you know, that may factor into it. But if you move enough air, usually you're gonna do okay. Other part of keeping it cool, I've run into a pile of sites where I'll be looking down at a transmitter doing a bird's eye view and all the air is blasting past the back of it at 100 miles an hour and very little of it goes through the transmitter. That means that transmitter's got a negative pressure. You could be pumping hundreds of CFM of positive pressure in there, but if you're blasting it all past where it needs to go, you're not doing yourself any favors. Okay, direct the air through the transmitter. Okay, and again, AM, FM, TV doesn't matter. Now the things to look at, some transmitters, and I'll pick ours for example, have air intakes front and rear. That'll impact how you lay out your airflow. Okay, other transmitters may have some back pressure inside and you've got to force more air through them to get sufficient cooling. One of the things you can look at, and tube transmitters are the same way, is the delta. Look at the delta temperature between intake and exhaust. Okay, how many people have done the tuning on a tube transmitter by checking the stack temperature? Okay, as an example. Well, on a solid state transmitter, if you look at the intake air and the exhaust air and check with your manufacturer, they should be able to tell you. I can tell you with our boxes, typically we design for a 10 degrees Celsius or 18 degree Fahrenheit heat rise. If you're seeing more than that, you probably don't have enough airflow. Okay? If you're seeing more than that on a tube transmitter, you either don't have enough airflow or you got it tuned wrong. But again, it's a troubleshooting tool. If you can measure intake and exhaust, it's useful. Air conditioning. How many people are running like Bard unit in their building? Just Shane's nod. So Bard units are lovely and they're built 100% upside down for broadcast facilities. Okay, the cool air goes out the top, filters down to the ground. It's wonderful for a home or an office. It's beautiful. It's exactly what it should be. For a transmitter, almost said it. That's wrong. Forgot he was recording there. Okay, so if you're running something like that, it's worth your while to invest in getting a sheet metal tech out to flip the intake and exhaust so that the cool air goes down low where the transmitter wants to suck the cool air in and the hot air goes out the top where the air conditioner can pull it back. Okay, so just one of the, again, it's airflow. It's one of the things that, I mean, we're all really good at grounding, we're all really good at fixing stuff, installing stuff, but we don't think a lot about airflow. And the HVAC techs that you hire are used to work in office buildings and homes. Cool air goes out, settles down so you don't have draft blowing over people's faces and they're all happy. Equipment hates that stuff. All right, so that's something else to think about. Okay, so look at that. We've blown 5 minutes on tip number 1. Like I said, the presentation that never ends. It'll speed up in a bit, but I do cover a little more time on those. Keep it clean. I shouldn't have to say this, but I do. And we're going to have a little war story in a bit because this is how I do this. It's easier to do show and tell than it is to just have me up here blabbing on. Air filters are something that don't get changed often enough. And don't see Gary in the room. Good. One of his sites is one of my favorites. I've been to sites, and Dan's seen this picture before, so I'm not going to show it so you can all blame Dan for not seeing it. I went to 3 sites in June. One in Duluth, Minnesota, one in Upper Wisconsin, and one in Saginaw, Michigan. All 3 sites, the air filters were filthy. All 3 sites, engineers I know and trust, and every single one of them had been cleaned within the previous 2 weeks. What happens in June in the upper Midwest? Cottonwoods, which means that air filters need to be cleaned much more frequently. In October, not so much. So the other thing to remember about air filters is your schedule for cleaning or replacing them will be impacted by your environment. Okay, it's something to think about. A lot of folks, they'll write a schedule down and say, clean the air filters every 2 months, set a reminder. In June, it needs to be every 2 weeks. So just remember that one. Okay, if you've got metal mesh filters, you can wash them, make sure they're dry. And again, I can't believe I have to say that, but I wouldn't have to say it if it hadn't already happened. That was step 2. After they're dry, metal mesh filters require a sticky substance to get sprayed on. Filter coat is the trade name we used to use. I don't know what they call it now. You can Google filter coat, K-O-T-E, and it'll send you to a substitute page. If you don't have that sticky spray, you're not blocking as much as the dust. And especially in an old rig, again, with higher voltage, dust and HV, bad combination. Okay, again, boom. Keep it grounded. As we said in the preamble, this is something I do know a little bit about, and we are going to do some show and tell on the next slide. I run into a pile of sites, and you can see 2 things wrong. Well, you can see a bunch of things wrong in those pictures. I don't have, I do have a laser pointer. Oh, it's all over now. Shane, don't chase it. Sorry. So a couple of things. Number 1, how many hams in the room? Anybody ever make a choke by wrapping a wire around a ferrite? So you basically got a wire and a ferrous piece of material, right? And that makes an inductor, chokes off high frequencies. Lightning contains some high frequency components, something to think about. If you run your ground wire through a metal conduit, you've created a choke. Okay? So don't do that. If you've got to, if you're in a situation where the building code requires you to have the wire enclosed, use PVC if you can, or buy one of the little adapter kits that let you attach the little nipple on the end of the conduit to connect the ground wire directly to the conduit and make the conduit part of the ground. Okay? Something else you can do. But absolutely don't run a single wire through a conduit if you can avoid it. Ground wires should be, I was doing so good with this thing, see now we can't chase it. Ground wires should be short and straight. We don't need drip loops on a ground wire in a building. Okay? So short and straight. And the reason for this is, of course, wire has a specific resistance per foot. And inductance, right, because the high frequency component. So the goal here is to keep that as minimal as possible. We are playing a voltage divider game here in lightning protection. Okay? Lightning hits a place, it's got choices. Can I go through the equipment? Can I go through the surge protector to ground? Can I go to the AC lines? Okay, and the goal is to keep the resistance and inductance, the overall impedance, to the path we want it to take as low as possible and make it as high as possible to the other areas. So if you run the cables to the transmitter a little bit longer, even better. Adds a little more inductance and resistance. Throw a couple of ferrites on them. Same deal. And we'll talk about the ferrites later because of course we will. Kevin already knows my reputation. So does Shane, so does Dan. All right, that's it. I'm done talking to y'all. So this here is a little war story. So about 3 weeks ago, I was down in Nashville. 3 weeks ago, a month ago, when was I down in Nashville? Some of your guys were there. Come on, when was that? It wasn't that long ago anyway. doing a session, and they asked me if I could go over and do a site inspection in West Virginia. Nashville to Huntington's only a 5.5 hour drive. Sure, why not? So I jump in the SUV and away we go. And so I get to West Virginia and I walk in, and the owner had been complaining because he had spent, at a guess, about 20 grand in parts over 10-year life of a transmitter. That's a heck of a lot of money to be spending on repairs. And he said, it's a brand new site. We built a brand new site. So I wander in and start looking around. Well, the first thing I see, and it's hard to tell on the picture, but that's the tower with the coax. What you don't see anywhere on that tower is a ground kit. So no ground kit. So the coax antenna going straight down, big old capacitor to the tower, no ground. Coax hits the bottom, big old loop into the building. There is a ferrite, one ferrite on the coax, no ground. Goes straight to the transmitter. The base of the tower had a ground. It had a piece of 6-gauge soft-drawn copper, so basically an AM ground radial, with a clamp to a leg of the galvanized steel tower. So brass clamp, galvanized steel tower leg, copper wire.
What could go wrong?
Going to a ground rod with a brass clamp on the copper ground rod. Actually copper-clad steel, but at this point, who's counting? So you can look at this picture. You can see that the transmitter, also 6-gauge soft-drawn copper wire, looping around to the transmitter ground. You can see the AC ground where the AC enters the building. What you can't see is how they're tied together, because they're not. Okay, Earth has a resistance per foot. Could be, it'll vary from one place to another very much. In West Virginia, ballpark it, in that particular site, probably about 3 to 4 ohms per foot. That's about a foot. 3 to 4 ohms. If I'm standing there and a 100,000 amp lightning strike hits that tower and starts dissipating through the earth, what happens between that foot and that foot? E equals I times R. Okay, it won't be 100,000 amps at this point, but it's going to be a significant amount of current with 3 to 4 ohms of resistance, equals a whole lot of voltage between that foot and that foot. This is why they tell you to keep your feet together when you're in a field in a lightning storm. And crouch down and kiss your ass goodbye, but that's a, oh, sorry, recording. I knew it was going to happen sooner or later. All right, so what I suggested was we remove the transmitter ground totally, reroute the transmitter grounding with strap, not 6-gauge soft-drawn copper, because again, inductance, skinny wires, skin effect, and run it over to the AC ground. Run the tower ground around to the AC ground. Leave your ferrite in place, and I'm willing to bet that'll make a difference if they add surge protection, because that was the other thing they don't have. No surge protector. So you got a 200-foot lightning rod in the mountains of West Virginia with multiple high impedance grounds, no surge protector. What do you think's going to happen? Okay, so buy a lot of transmitter parts. The worst part is, I know the engineer who installed this. He's a good engineer. It's just sometimes owners get a little persnickety, and we've got to sell the need. And that's frustrating, but and that's a whole different, we've had this discussion at the SBE meetings over the past day or so about learning how to sell the need for investing in stuff like this. Okay, and this right here is a case in point. $2,000 worth of labor and ground strap, a teenager with a shovel and a strong back, you could pretty much solve all the problems that these guys have had. Now, will I guarantee they'd never have a failure? Heck no, I won't guarantee that. But I can guarantee they'll have a lot fewer failures. How many people have a FLIR camera or some sort of infrared camera? Y'all, everybody should have one of these in their toolkit. Okay, the FLIR brand, and they're the ones I use, so that's the one I know, but $250 delivered for a FLIR 1. And I've stopped 3 site fires so far. by walking in, standing in the doorway, taking a picture of the breaker panel. My record so far is 197 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know how hot a breaker's supposed to get, but I'm betting 197's pushing it. Now, granted, two things. I am not a certified thermographer, so that number, take it with a grain of salt. But let's just say when you touch the breaker, you raise a blister, that's too warm. And a thermal imager is the fastest way to see that. You know, you take that picture, something looks really, really hot, that's your cue. We got to tighten something up in here, or that breaker's getting weak. This is an obvious one, but we're getting on that time of year. Here's a trick. You walk into your transmitter building on the brightest, sunniest day you can. You shut the doors, you turn the lights off, and you just turn around looking for glowing where the lights. If you can see a pinhole of light, a mouse can get through it, almost guaranteed. Okay, a little bit of great stuff and some stainless steel wool. Stainless steel wool, because regular steel wool will disintegrate in no time, and then they just chew through the great stuff and away you go. But yeah, the expanding foam, wonderful stuff. Told you we were going to talk about ferrites at least once. So the purpose of it, how many people are familiar with what ferrites are used for? Couple? How many people have heard me blather on about what ferrites are used for? Okay, well in that case, yeah, Tim's over there going, don't do it again, man. I know. It's Shane's picture. Actually, wait.
Kevin took that and
Yeah.
sent it to you and said, look, ferrites.
Yeah. Well, and I properly credited it. So I should have said, P.S. it's Shane's site. I'll change that. So the purpose of the ferrites as we use them, okay, and again, the hams know you run a single conductor, twist it, wrap it around a ferrite, you made a choke, okay? You basically made an inductor. Well, if you have a feed and a return, whether it's 3 phases of AC and a return with the neutral, or whether it's 2 phases like split phase 100 or 240 and a return, or whether it's a feed, center conductor, and a shield for a coax, anytime you have a feed and a return going through a ferrous material like that, if you get an imbalance on one leg, only on one leg, and not on the opposing leg, then that will create, of course, when you run current through a wire, you create a magnetic field around the wire. Well, that will induce through the ferrous material in the ferrite and create an opposing current on the opposite leg. Now your net result, your net difference is this doesn't change. It's neutral, zero. Neutral is in near zero, not neutral as in electrical neutral. So the purpose of the ferrite in that regard is it's twofold. Number one, it does add a little bit of inductance to the lead, so it adds some impedance. Number two, though, and the important one, is to help minimize the potential difference between the two in the case of a surge. So for common mode protection, it's useful. On its own, it's not going to do anything. If you've got a really poorly grounded site and get a catastrophic lightning strike and the only thing protecting you is one ferrite, it's going to explode because it will saturate hard and it is amazing. Especially if you happen to be on the phone when the guy's in the room and the ferrite explodes. Because the sound effects and the accompanying commentary are... I just wish I had recorded that call. Now, having said that, again, on its own, ferrite's not going to do anything. You need surge protection and proper grounding. But if you've got surge protection and proper grounding, again, we're playing a voltage divider game. So that's just a little bit of extra impedance to help sway that curve a little bit. This one. How many people have ever worked on a transmitter alone? How many people realize you really shouldn't ever work on a transmitter alone? All right. I do a safety presentation, and one of the slides I put up a list of headlines based on a Google search for engineer found dead. And I picked engineers that I knew. 3 of them in that particular slide. All gone because they were at the site alone. Only one of them got electrocuted. One guy slipped and fell, hit his head on something and bled out at the site. Another guy had a heart attack. Nobody was there to call 911. Okay, they found him 2 days later. All right, if you absolutely have to go up there, and so I always argue for a buddy system. You bring somebody with you. It could be wife, girlfriend, partner, boss, DJ. I don't care. Bring somebody. And they only need to know two things. Where's the circuit breaker and how to dial 911. If they know CPR, that's beneficial if you really do something stupid. But even getting help up there and killing the power if you do something stupid is a good start. If you can't do that, have a call-out system. You know, these days, I mean, these things, you can get the fit watches with the, did you trip and fall? Should I summon assistance? And if you don't answer it in 30 seconds to cancel, assistance is summoned. Okay, so there are options like that. Shane, you use tile trackers that,
Spot trackers.
yeah, and they do
You
some
hold our
safety.
knock to check in, and yeah, if somebody's at a site, doesn't check back in, the knock knows there might be trouble.
So there's another example of something you can do. All right, we work in a job that can sometimes be dangerous, and we get so familiar with it that sometimes we can take it a little too casually. And you only, in this job, sometimes get the chance to make that mistake once. So just, yeah, use a little care and caution. By the same token, the lockout tagouts, what's wrong with that picture?
The keys are in them.
The keys are in them. So lockout tagout, the theory is that if you lock it out like that, nobody can turn the breaker on while you're working. Well, in this particular case, I know this engineer, he's since passed, not because of anything stupid, just because we all getting older. But he told me, he goes, I'm the only one on the site. I use the lockout to slow me down. When I walk back, before I unlock and flip the breaker, I stop. And did I take the ground wand off the final? Did I restore that airflow interlock that I bypassed? You know, did I do this? Did I do that? And he runs through the steps in his mind, then he unlocks it and flips the breaker and brings it back up. So a lockout kit, you can buy one at Home Depot for under $100. It's a really worthwhile investment. Okay, so that and your thermal imager, there's the tool things to add to your toolkit. Okay, so one or two things that are going to tiptoe into Shane's territory or into his presentation in a couple of minutes. Oh my God, I cannot believe that I still have to tell people that password is not a good password. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, also not a good password. Admin, no. What's that? Yeah, there you go. Or you could, let's get really brave and go password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, how hard could that be, right?
Blank.
Yeah, blank. Or if you've got a pre-2017 barracks unit and haven't updated the software, the default username and password is nothing whatsoever. Do you know how many thousands of those are on the public internet, visible right now? As of this morning, 1,700 and change. What do y'all use barracks units for?
STLs.
Or tie lines, or Comrex, or, and you can find them. They're out there. There's Internet of Things search engines that will show you how to do that. I'm not going to teach you how to hack stuff, but although that is a fun little diversion. I go out and search for Nautel transmitters about once a month. On average, I find half a dozen out there visible. Knock on wood, last time I checked, none of them were using the default username and password. But if it's visible at all, it's a target for hacking. Because at that point, you can start running brute force algorithms on it. Okay, so use a VPN. They're cheap and they're easy to get these days. I use one, this one's called Tunnel Bear. This is the one I use on all my personal gear. And I mean, it's wonderful. If for no other reason, oh, never mind, he's recording. I'm not going to tell you what I use it for. Let's just say there are TV programs you can't get in Canada, but you can't anyway. So, yeah, this one, Tunnel Bear, runs me $3.50 a month on average. Unlimited data, so there's no data cap on it. And it gives me unlimited devices, so I've got everything in the house running it. Okay, just as one example, you can buy hardware VPNs. A lot of routers these days have VPN hardware built into them. You just have to turn it on. Okay, same as firewalls. If you're running without a firewall, there's no help at this point. And the reason I bring this up, and I know Shane's going to do a lot of this again in a couple of minutes, so I'm not going to beat that horse too badly. But as an industry, we suck so much at IT security. Oh, it's so terrible. And the basic rule of thumb is if it's easy for you to use, it's easy to be hacked. The harder it is to get into, the harder it is to hack. Give you an example. This laptop that I'm running this presentation on, when I open that, the first thing that happens is BitLocker comes up and asks for the key to unencrypt the hard drive. After that's done, then I've got a 12-character password to get into it to actually access anything in the laptop. If I want to do anything on the Nautel network, that's a VPN with multi-factor authentication and 2 more passwords. Then I can start to go to work. Okay? That's my routine every single time my laptop goes to sleep, let alone every time I wake up in the morning. Okay? If it's easy to use, it's easy to compromise. So just pay attention to it. How many people have a site visit schedule? Few. How many people adjust that schedule month to month based on environmental changes like cottonwood season? Okay, so those are the sort of things. And somebody will say, how often should I go to the site? I don't know. It's up to you, it's up to your site, it's up to your specific environment. But that's the kind of thing you need to be aware of. Somebody's going to have to throw something at me when we get close to time. Like I said, this presentation doesn't have a specific end. I'll go until somebody says, shut up. My wife's the organized person in the family. She makes the checklists. I just do what I'm told. It's safer for everybody involved. But you need to have a list. It's hard to remember every single thing, especially if the GM's calling every 5 minutes going, when are we going to be back on the air? Everything you do should have a checklist. And then you can just go through, copy it out, or put it on your laptop. Just tick, tick, tick as you go through it. Bang, you're done. You don't miss anything. Okay, how many times have you left the site and got halfway home and said, oh crap, I forgot to put it in remote? I'll put my hand up for that one. Yeah, there we go. You know, it happens. It does. Having a checklist, did I put it in remote? Oh, whoops, done. This one, 3 minutes, all right. Like I said, we're probably going to get to about 15 or so, give or take. I give anybody, by the way, if anybody does want a copy of this, grab me before I walk out the door and go back to tear down the booth. Grab a card. I'll be happy to email you a copy of it. Or get my email address from Chris Merritt or one of the ODB folks. Is more than happy to provide it. This is something we also don't do really well, is talking manager. We know we need a new transmitter, but the manager doesn't understand tubes are hard to replace or hard to come by. The manager understands tubes cost $8,000 a piece and this thing sucks twice as much power as a new transmitter would, so you're wasting $8,000 a month on electricity. Managers understand that. Okay, it's how you present it. You can say the exact same thing 2 different ways and have 2 totally different meanings. Give you an example. Shane and I go in a race, Shane wins. Next day, Shane's newspaper, Shane and Jeff are in a race, Shane wins. My newspaper, Shane and Jeff are in a race. Shane finishes next to last, Jeff finishes second. Same data. Okay, it's all how you present it. The one thing that as engineers we do really badly is market ourselves. And it's something that we need to get better at. Okay, be part of the management team. And to do that, we need to speak the language. And they talk ROI, cost of ownership, cost of operation. And that's stuff we can learn. We're smart folks. But it's not something that comes natural because we're used to talking watts, amps, volts, boom. Interface, interface, interface. Okay, I don't have this one, I'm beating the drum. You're all here, so you're all doing it. Okay, SBE, by all means, it's a useful tool, valuable resource. I think we're working on making it even more valuable. Okay, trade shows, wonderful things. Look, I've got a copy of the save image. So I had a customer in Wisconsin up in Lake Geneva. And Nancy's the general manager, and she'll tell you we were doing everything right. We were backing up. We were air gapping. We'd do the backup. We'd pull the drive. It would go to a different facility for the weekend. You know, every day we were doing it. We were doing it all right. Except for the one day somebody had a dinner appointment, didn't unplug the backup, came in Monday morning, turned on the computers, got a big red screen that said your files are all encrypted. Turns out they had 3 layers of ransomware that had to be unencrypted. okay? So do the backups, but air gap them. It's not enough to back up without having an air gap. Surge protectors, like I said, they're critical. I don't care whose you use. That's an LEA, the rake cap, there's Control Concept. There's so many different ones out there. If you don't have surge protection, you're going to blow something up, period. And I hate compression connection. This is the ground at my house, by the way. It doesn't look like that anymore. Now it looks like it's brazed because it is. But exothermic connections whenever you can. Brazing, Silphos. I love CAD welding. You can buy, did you know you can buy CAD weld molds on Amazon now? How cool is that? We get to blow stuff up on purpose. The only thing you got to do is figure out what you're connecting to what, get the mold assigned for that, put it on, touch it off, pop. It's awesome. All right, let's wrap it up on that note. I think we're at about time. Oh, whatever. I've never finished exactly on time in my life. I didn't see any reason to start now, but y'all do have another session to get to, and I don't want to hold them up. So that was it in a nutshell. Like I said, there's 30 more slides in here. I'm more than happy to share it with anybody who wants it. Reach out, give me a holler. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll take a short break. It will be sponsored by Broadcast Software International. We'll reconvene at 3:10 for the closing session on cybersecurity in room D281. And don't forget to put a business card in, I don't know, do you know what it is, Blake? For the administration desk, for door prizes. There's a LG 4K television. So you don't want to miss that.
See, if I'd known y'all had a break, we could have done 10 more.